the whole story.
Wasn't me. This is what we do have inside the Daily Nation today. As you can see there, that we have the CS Murkomen dragging Huru into the current state of play of the Jomo Kenyatta. As we just saw there before we took a short break, now we have an interim committee to investigate and to audit the leaking and all the airports as well. And this is what I want to just pose to our panelists. Do we need it? Already right now we're spending so much on so many committees, but do we normally get this particular report? By the way, what happened even to the police reforms task force that we had the president having an extension for the task force? I think it's been over a year right now since that task force was commissioned. Is there any report aside from just the uniform that we were to try and showcase the different parts of the uniform? But Bilokero, hakuna mataa. Hakuna mataa.
Hakuna mataa. That's the reality. I mean, we have two major blackouts in just a couple of months. It's something that is very rare in other countries. You know, it's in a decade probably you hear about it once. But clearly, I think the one on the airport is the one that is very embarrassing and that Kenyans found unacceptable. And the action by the CS, I think, is completely misplaced. And I think it's unnecessary. You cannot set up a team to go and look at the airports and look at the status. Look, Kenya Airports Authorities are one of the most respected state institutions. They have experts, they have engineers, they have, they have experts who are working there. He needs to demand a report on the status of the airport from the people who are running. They have experts. At best, if he is not satisfied with them, he should hire a firm of consultants. They should hire a firm of consultants, engineering consultants, to look at, but there's also public institutions. Public Works has got so many engineers and consultants. In fact, his ministry, if anything, is culpable in what has happened here, because any government contract, whether it's a road or any infrastructure project, must be supervised by engineers from the Ministry of Roads and Infrastructure. Those are the guys who engineer, who are the ones who inspect, who approve the payments before a contractor concludes the work and leaves the site. So I think you cannot blame individuals who are running a government. I mean, individuals running a government come and go, but government doesn't go. The government has been there, KA is there, ministry is there. Those people who are running the institutions of government have always been the same ones. So, and the airport, let me tell you, Jomo Kenyatta is a drain on the economy, really. Jomo Kenyatta, every other year there is some renovation going on. Billions. There's no time in the last 20 years that you don't go to Jomo Kenyatta and you don't find renovations going on. All the time, there's a lot of money being spent. But the people who are responsible for supervising, the engineers, they're all part of the ministry. Normally, if you have any government project, it's the ministry people who are. If it is not, then the state corporation itself has its own engineers and experts. So I think asking experts to come and, a task force, reports will be done, they will not be implemented. They will be wasting away on shelves. We saw the last one done last year in 2021 on Kenya Power, the independent power purchase agreements. Very beautiful one. Nothing has been implemented, and we're still having the blackouts. So I think this will be many. The police one, is still going on. But, we get these things and they'll be filed away. What is required is, this is a government institution. It should work. If generator failed, who was responsible? Why is nobody being fired? The buck stops with the people who are running the institution. It's not about the fellow who was supposed to switch on who forgot.
Indeed.
There are people who are responsible. You don't see any action being taken. For a national blackout, nobody in Kenya Power takes blame. Nobody in the ministry is being fired. Nobody at the airport, if in this particular case. So I think it's a joke. These people are taking Kenyans for a joke. They are unable to deal with the situation and, just trying to fumble around by forming...
we are paying as taxpayers, the Kenya Airports Authority, who are meant to actually be, the administrators of airports in this country. What is the sole function if we have another interim committee that is bound to investigate? That's what we should begin with.
And unfortunately, in this particular case, first I agree with Bilo that there was no need for a committee, and I'm also going to add my voice to that. But we are starting off, unfortunately, with the institution that has been one of the most liquid. Kenya Airport Authority is not a money-losing entity. It's one of the prized institutions that people like to serve in, and so on. And it's amazing that they have that reputation, but have leaking roofs and so on. So that's a clearly management problem there. You can see it's not a resource substance. They don't need funds from the ministry to go and fix that. They generate sufficient resources to do that kind of thing. Now that's one. Two, we should also blame ourselves a bit. I think we as Kenyans, I don't want to make it any larger than that. Some people like to say we on this continent, but just we as Kenyans have a poor maintenance culture. We have a tendency to let things slide until they are replaced wholly, including public service vehicles in public institutions. You don't service them, 3 years they're down, you buy another one, and so on. And so we're a bit slow to do maintenance. You find these plastic carpets on the floor at the airport, they are now torn. You don't need to wait even for your CEO, just the guy who does the local maintenance. You go to washrooms and the toilet holders have fallen off the wall. I went to one where it's put on the window sill, and the window sill is high up behind you. Now, we know the sequence when you go into these places. You know, that location is not one of the most suitable. We just are bad at it, let us face it. And I think, again, none of that requires anybody beyond that institution. The minister should not even be drawn in. No, he's drawing himself in. I don't think he should be the one to come and fix it. Thirdly, all these institutions have strategic plans. They have, and 3-year or maybe 5-year annual plans and so on, mentioning areas of intervention, of priority, and so on. And just by checking how well that's being implemented, whether it's just hot air and so on. This could have been done in a meeting. The minister, if he wanted to hold it, would have held in his room. He's given them 28 days. I can say on this show that I bet that's likely to be extended. 28 days won't be enough to produce a report, then it goes on and goes on, whereas things are already within the desk of the CS. So I don't think that my friend, the CS Murkomen, is doing the right thing by going the committee way. I think I'm sure that he has enough information to act on this. I don't think that we should go. I don't think that we should go that route.
We should not go that route.
In Kisumu, so as I conclude, the new airport, Kisumu is not one of them, but in Kisumu, if it rains, there's water all over the front lounges and so on. I think it is an error in design and so on and so forth. You don't need a committee, for example, to fix that. You don't need to get things to be falling. That needs just to be fixed, period.
It just needs to be fixed. So we always are talking nation, as we saw. NDC, we now have a new committee to try and interrogate how did the leaking really happen at the end of the day. Let's hear from Shemochodo.
Debal, in my earlier professional life, there was talk of red herring. I say this because we probably could be having a bigger problem than what we are seeing. And as an IT person, I'm really wondering whether this is a cyber security attack on our core infrastructure that's happening. But by coming up with the juicy stories like this, our attention is focused elsewhere. I really would be keen to do a technical audit to see that, for example, when there's a blackout, and for the other picture cartoon that you are showing, the Honorable CS is there with a lamp, a safari lamp. I am wondering why a safari lamp and not even a torch, and of course there is the umbrella that the roofs are leaking. But I think dragging Excellency former President, while I have misgivings to the previous administration, and when the opposition leader castigates cost of living, I'm asking myself, maybe he should have been saying that more when he had control. But that's a story for another day. But to blame this on the previous presidency, I mean, a leaking roof is not something for a cabinet secretary. I fully agree with my colleagues, Chairman here, Bunyasi. I think this is something that within the Kenya Airports Authority, they have capacity to handle. And to, maintenance, to blame a previous administration that's been out of power for more than a year, even if they were maintaining it then, maintenance is something that must be ongoing. So I think I'd want to plead with the current administration that yes, they've been in power, and with a light touch, my big brother keeps using they. I'm wondering if it should be we. But I think we should get away from blaming the previous administration. Definitely, this is not acceptable. I'm even wondering how safe our aeroplanes are. You know, if this kind of leakage can happen, because there are such stringent standards you expect at an airport, an international airport of the stature of JKI. So please, let's up our games. Let's get it all done right. For me, I would want to look much deeper. Is this just a red herring to divert attention?
All right, so before we wind up, Bill, I wanted just you to also to pick up on the issue of the entire process, because we need to look at the entire chain on how things also come to this upshot of where now we have a leaking roof. The deputy president now is blaming the engineers. Who hired the engineers? Who contracted the engineers? And if the engineers did a sloppy job at the end of the day, we need to question on how also they were shortlisted and the credibility of the work. So you cannot come and tell the public that it was the engineers and it was the sole function of the government to contract these engineers and give them those jobs. So after those jobs were done, were there any sufficient auditing that was done to save proof that
first of all,
they're safe?
The area where the leakage was, which was also on that video clip, is the area that was renovated just 2 years ago in 2021. The newest and the most beautiful part of the airport, actually. When you go there, you see this way the ceiling is done with beautiful wooden, and it's the most beautiful part of that departure area. So I think when you see the CS saying this airport was built in 1978, it's older than me, I think it's you can't lie to Kenyans. Really, this thing was just done the other day, and billions were spent. And a contractor, let me tell you, cannot be blamed. The person to blame when there's such a thing is the consultants, the engineers, the people who supervise.
Right.
Yes, and the people who supervise are normally hired by government. Either they are the Ministry of Works supervisors, or in institutions like KA, they have their own engineers. Otherwise, they get the ones for public service ministry engineers. But it is government engineers who supervise the contractor. So contractor cannot be blamed. He cannot be paid a shilling until you are satisfied that this project has been completed to the satisfaction of the contractor. So you cannot blame engineers. Engineers are working for the government. And so responsibility in public service, people must learn responsibility is always with the person who is in charge. The buck stops with the leader. That's why you are a leader. You take responsibility for what your people have done if they fail to do their work. So you cannot say, blame people every time, But there's a whole process of procurement where the designs are approved by government or by KA itself, and then the procurement is done. The contractor does the job as per the specs, as per the contract, and they must be approved at every stage by engineers, either government engineers or KA engineers. So you cannot really, a contractor will tell you, look, my work was cleared, and there is a defect period. For example, if you are supposed to, they hold some deposit, some money for is it a year or something, a defect period, defect liability period, about 6 months to 1 year.
Okay.
If there's nothing, then the person is paid and you are done.
Fully paid.
So this could be a maintenance problem. This could be a damage.
It is not
the minister was saying, the aircrafts that were landing were causing vibrations, and the pipes were you saw it.
Oh really?
Oh yes. He said
come on.
The piping that is used was so poor quality that when the aircrafts are landing on the runway, they create so much vibration, the pipes burst, and that's why there's a so I mean, honestly,
trust government now to tell us. You remember when there was an explosion at Wilson Airport?
National security places. There is KCA. There are international standards. Even the type of materials, the type of things that are used, the type of construction for airports are different from others. So there are those international standards
that they have to be maintained.
You cannot just put up an airport with using the same materials that you do in our homes. Yeah.
Right, so the CS will spare us all those shaggy dog stories, as they say, because Kenyans have become more informed right now, and we also implore the CS to actually backtrack on some of his statements that they said, like having this particular committee, because it's actually a pure wastage of public resources. People should get down to work. KA officials should go down to work, and that's why we wake up every morning to come and to work, so that you can get taxed to have these services deployed. So I think having this committee, it's purely a waste of resources. And remember also, some other government spokesperson talked about, you remember that explosion at Wilson Airport? Some very shaggy dog story as well was told that, it was a mixture of things at the store. There was Omo and there was cooking oil, and all those really led up to an explosion. But let's see what another government spokesperson is saying. And this is Isaac Mwaura, who now says President William Ruto's trip outside the country since assuming office in September 2022 have gained Kenya 2 trillion shillings in investments. Among them is investments from the United Kingdom, the United States and China on ICT, energy, transport, education, labor and security. Mwaura also said that the national tree planting holiday that was held on Monday saw more than 150 million trees planted, with money raised from the well-wishers. He says this could mean that all Kenyans planted an average of 3 trees on Monday.
You will see, hundreds of billions of shillings that then would actually inject, new revenue, new liquidity into our market. Much, much more than an airfare or somebody staying in a hotel or, And what the government has been able to do also, for your information, and it's good I tell you this, it has reduced the number of delegations for anyone going out of the country. And government has also capped the number of days that any government official can travel, up to 7 days maximum, and within a year up to 45 days. Delegations have been reduced to as low as even 3 people at times. So if there's one area that has been affected by budget cuts, it is actually foreign travel, including even Parliament. So that is something that Cabinet has approved, that some of these meetings also ambassadors can represent us. But where the president of the country is required, I think is only fair, because he is the #1 diplomat of this country, and he carries with him that, because it is a constitutional duty.
All right, 1 trillion shillings that we've gained from these trips.
He said 2.
He said 2. All right, I'd read actually 1, so he says 2.
2.
Is that the case? Or 1 trillion shillings accumulatively in terms of numbers, or maybe also pledges? We talked about the trees as well, 150 of them, but you said there was, what was the opportunity cost? So we had 150, but we're losing 7 billion shillings in a day.
15, he said, well,
You said 2 trillion is...
The bulk, for me, again, 2 weeks ago, we bumped or met into the deputy president in Brussels. I can, I think, confirm that his team, his backup team, was very lean. So to that extent, there seems to be effort in reducing people who accompany the dignitaries out of the country. For me, I would be more concerned about what's the cost-benefit analysis.
Yes.
People traveling out, maybe they spend 1 million shillings, but in turn, what do they bring back? If they were bringing back, say, 4 or 5 million shillings as a consequence, for me, there would be no really big problem. But the danger is when people go out, rarely is there a report that this is what has come in. And for me, it boils down to data. So, and this reminds me, Debal, even though we moved from the airport discussion when there's talk of a shaking, tremor, and so on and so forth, geospatial data for the benefit of Kenyans, particularly those who are planning to be house owners in this city, talking to some of our geospecialists, there is some part of this city where there is concerns, there may have been quarries underground. if you're going to put up tall buildings, the geospatial studies and all that needs to be so solid that there are certain amounts of weight that they cannot carry, given to what has happened underground. So I wouldn't totally dismiss the claim of the CS that there was a bit of shaking and all. But do we have sufficient data upon which, if we are building the airports, whatever, and all that, did we make sure that all the elements, and there are global standards, we're not reinventing the wheel, that we have complied with those standards? Part of it, finally, the bow, our known problem is lack of ethics and shortcuts. Did we do things professionally? If we did, at every stage of the journey, there shouldn't be this problem that we are seeing. But I wouldn't discount what's the cost until we fully analyze all the various data. But of course, in this case of leaking, it looks really, it's really mundane. I mean, it's brick and mortar for me. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say.
But the issue of vibration, I think that is far stretched because I've had a stint at an aviation industry, and it's not that true that there's a vibration that really comes from the engine of these aeroplanes. It's not true. How does that really happen? I've never felt any vibration. In fact, what it should be telling us is the safety, the occupational safety hazards of the Kenya Airports Authority workers. Because I remember even when I was there, they used to actually come and test our hearing. Mm-hmm. The capacity, because you tend to lose your hearing capacity when you're working in that environment because of the roaring of the engines that really comes from the aeroplanes themselves. So they'll test even how the decibels your ear can pick to the lowest to the highest, how far you can actually, because unbeknownst to you, you're actually losing your hearing because of the effects of, and that also brings to the fore, are these workers insured?
Right.
When it comes to also their hearing, that when you lose it now, Kenya Airports Authority will actually pay. So on the issue of vibration, I think that was far-fetched.
But I think you're confirming one thing. There's quite a bit of data. To what extent are we using, for example, artificial intelligence to make sure that we are safeguarded on all those data aspects, the decibels and all that, the vibrations? I would be slow as an engineer to discount anything, although it's far-fetched. But I would be cautious.
Right. Bill, you want to say something?
On the what the spokesman said, the 2 trillion. You know, when I watched the news, I was wondering where 2 trillion. 2 trillion, even in dollar terms, is about $13 billion.
Right.
Our entire budget for the year is 15 billion. So when you see
we've gotten half of the budget.
He has brought in 2 trillion in 1 year, and that's not reflected anywhere in our budget.
We are sorted.
It's a bit far-fetched. I know the spokesman mentioned this British project, the UK project of the PPP and so forth, which has been in the works for a long time. But I think the issue has been that these frequent trips by public officers in government, whether it's for benchmarking or whether it's for looking for investors or not, I think some of us have argued that charity begins at home. If you want to look for investors, try to make the business environment here conducive. Talk to the business investors here. Let us have an economic conference here in the country. Right. Let us try and address the challenges we have so that our own institutions, businesses and factories and businesses here, farmers and everyone can produce, can operate at optimum. I think that is what we need. And that requires the government to sit down with everyone in the productive sector in this country and listen to what are the challenges. Why is my farm not working at optimum level? Why is my factory not? Why is our IT department not? I think it's important when we deal with the environment. Then you can talk of investors coming.
Indeed.
But going out nowadays in this day and age and trying to talk to an investor in Iceland that there's a country called Kenya. If you come, we're a gateway to East Africa and ABCD, and they get all that information online. I mean, everything that you have is already posted by your different Kenyan Invest and others have already put it on. There's nothing that people don't know about a country. So I think for me, it's the focus on getting those who are outside, but losing the investors who are inside the country. That's my concern, because businesses are shutting down every day. Yeah. You've seen it. Every day you're reading in newspapers. A lot of Kenyans are getting out of business because of the environment. The cost of the production is high. Our competitiveness is gone. Thuge was very clear. Thuge is the central bank governor. A day before the spokesman spoke, he was appearing before the Parliamentary Committee on Debt, and he said very clearly, our foreign direct inflows is the lowest in the whole region. He gave the figures for Uganda. He gave the figures for Uganda's $2.5 billion, he said, and $1.6 billion in Tanzania. And he said in Kenya we were getting some 700, 800, yeah, about 800. So he says it's been, and we know for the last 10 years it's been going down. So if you're getting $800 million, where are you getting the 13 billion? You announced that that's what we got. Our president brought in. I think it's good to look good, but I think let us focus on the environment. That's why people are going to those countries. The cost of production is cheaper, the power, the labor, the tax. That's what is pulling people to other countries.
Right.
This is our challenge.
Right. Yes. We have Eastleigh Traders Association here, and we had the chair also decrying the fact that it's become very expensive just for imports to come here in the country. And now they're mulling over to move to Tanzania or Uganda, where they can actually have the imports, which is the imports there are not as exorbitant. Paying for a container now, you have an increase since 2020 from 1.5, 1.7,
4.4
to 4.4 now.
Tax
it's not even, you can imagine, that is almost 100% or 200% of what was before. It's become very expensive. So if, and we know how Eastleigh has been very beneficial to many traders around, buying on a whole stock.
By the way, it's affecting all Gikomba, Nyamakima, everything across the country. That small, they are getting all the imports through the consolidated cargo. That's where they've now said, you know.
Right, and so the government is on it as well. So
yeah, a couple of things I got to say about, let me go back to the 2 trillion thing. I look at that as just, I didn't have any trust in that figure by itself. Because we don't understand, I don't know the methodology they could have used. If you take it seriously, it would become a very doubtful figure. But it's indicative that there must be some gain from all of the outreach and diplomacy the president has done. Just how much it is, you know, it depends on how you want to measure and what you measure and so on. So I think we should say the direction that is saying, let us cut costs, let us reduce travel, let's rationalize travel is the right direction. And I was also happy that that rationalization starts all the way from the presidency down. And I can tell you, at my little level as chairman of a corporation, wanted to go do benchmarking. I wanted to go to Marrakesh and attend some of the meetings, and I wasn't able to go. It's biting. It's real. They have a very good formula. If you are a CS, they may allow you 1 + 3. If you're a PS, 1 + 2. If you're a CEO or chairman, 1 + 0. These are real, you know, constraining factors and so on. And the head of civil service is quite ruthless in its implementation. The delegations of the deputy and the president, I think, have been halved, more or less. Maybe they can do more as we go further. But I would not be caught up on either the causality of the 2 trillion or that the trips actually have led to that. But we can say, certainly there are benefits that go with it. Let me comment quite quickly, I intended to do that earlier, about the central bank governor's observation. Yes, it is true. I am in the ministry of MITI that is working on these issues of FDIs and so on. And indeed, I think last year or so, we're at 488 billion. And our target is $488 million, sorry. Our target is 10 billion a year. You can see it's a long reach. And the neighbors are about as high as you have said that they are. And I think it is a kind of positive incentive to Kenya to say, why aren't we? And hopefully that will translate into institutional and policy changes to be able to create a more friendly atmosphere. And when you get free market operators like the groups operating in and from Eastleigh and around Eastleigh, they give you a benchmark, in fact, to see which way, how you can work to it. I believe that Kenya has the brains, and it has got the free inclination towards capitalism in ways that are completely different from our neighbors. Some of them are new entrants into it. I think over time, there's no reason why Kenya should be defeated in that game. I think we are going to learn enough, and we are going to pull up our socks. We have to, because if not, We are much more conscious about dropping the lower income, the things that some countries always sort of just saw across in Kenya. They didn't do it, and are now beginning to do it from a low base. And from a great enthusiasm, I think that we'll get back to it. I do not believe we should be there. And lastly, governor. I think the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya must tell Kenyans what his management strategy around the forex is going to be. It can't let it be a free fall. Even divers that do so for enjoyment, there are limits how far deep you want to try, how high up, and they say I'm going to go down head first in this. We can't let that happen. And IMF might have views and so on, but we must have, that's what I said at the beginning, we must have a Kenyan view to say, yes, we may want to depreciate our shilling more, but at what pace, until when? And if you leave it with high altitude free fall, you may not have the energy to stop it when you want to stop it. And it would crash, not only as a currency, but as a country. I really think that our central bank governor must also begin talk. He's talking a bit more than his predecessor. Must be able to tell the Kenyans just how far he's going to let go. And two, what is it they have agreed? What have they promised the IMF to say? We are going to liberalize this, and we will allow the exchange rate to fall to what? I think those are questions that we should really look at. And our governor is a very bright fellow. I know him very well. And he's aware of the global, not just that he's now governor, but he's aware of what's happening. I keep mentioning India. Countries that have managed their economy in partial resistance to IMF. And they have grown them, they have industrialized, and they're doing well. China did the same thing. They didn't just allow everybody to, from World Bank or IMF, even to visit or walk all over when you get in. I think we must, it's not a matter of how big our economy is. It's just a matter of how we can protect our analytics and the formulation of policy that is suited to our condition. Otherwise, it destroys governments, and it's going to destroy many other institutions.
Right, talking of China, the 8th edition of China Trade Week Kenya made a vibrant return after 3 years online. The event hosted at KICC witnessed a convergence of global industry leaders, diplomats and entrepreneurs for 3 days of impactful discussions and strategic collaboration. Let's just listen in.
China and Kenya have had long-standing bilateral relations for years. Speaking during the opening ceremony of the 8th edition of China Trade Week, the GX Country Director for Kenya, Edwin Masivo, highlighted the strategic importance of Kenya as the gateway for trade and investment in East Africa.
We have an incredible 3 days to create new relationships and connections, to learn our culture, including Ushuru, and sample what Nairobi has to offer. As you meet with potential business partners between today and Friday,
the various stakeholders expressed excitement about the evolving nature of the China Trade Week.
Today we are excited to launch many new platforms, including the e-Digital Africa Summit, which is a further demonstration of one of the key industry pillars, the technology, security and the digital ecosystem of Kenya that fosters to develop trade and investment dialogue. Now, this is a key mandate of the summit, and hopefully future editions will welcome an even bigger and global presence with your support.
The Kenyan government commended the trade fair, its resilience and role in fostering international trade and partnerships.
This is a leading B2B trade event, showcasing diverse industries like construction materials, furniture, agriculture, textiles, auto parts, just to mention a few. And I want to assure you that there are a number of areas that Kenya is partnering with China, a long history of partnership which goes beyond about 60 years. So a lot of collaboration in terms of trade, in terms of tourism, and even in airlines.
The majority and vast opportunities that are there for the Kenyans and also for our counterpart, the Chinese, and this lies majority on manufacturing. So my plea is for the Kenyans to really emulate the Chinese on the manufacturing, coming together to really understand how the Chinese work and how, because they are very big in manufacturing.
The event also saw the signing of some MOUs that included Fashion and Beauty Africa, KNCCI Nairobi chapter, and the China Trade Week, and a third one with the Mambo, an e-commerce platform connecting Kenyan businesses with Chinese suppliers and buyers. The event is set to continue over the next 2 days, officially closing its doors on Friday, 17th November. Rebecca Miruri Mulure, KTN News.
Right, thank you, Rebecca. There. So we want to just question Bill Okero as we are talking about the Sino-Kenya ties and festing the East and festing the West. We've seen from dialing back to the National Dialogue Committee conversation, where I want us just to focus on it and how it's bound to affect maybe moving forward. We can see the Star has put up that security dossier exposes a cost of Azimio protest was 50 billion shillings. The bipartisan talks that now was the upshot of the demonstrations now seems to be teetering on the edge of collapse as it is right now, because there are no new demands that it seems Azimio is putting forth on this. One of it is the cost of living, and many people are saying now we are actually under the yoke of IMF. We should consider moving to the West. Kenya has missed opportunities right now even to be part of the BRIC summit, where he was largely missing President William Ruto. And it seems everyone is gravitating towards, you're looking at the East African community towards now, where the BRICS as it is. So having this gesture that we can see, especially from the trading exhibition that is ongoing at the KICs, could we talk about it? Because it seems every policy that now the government is undertaking is determined by IMF. So are we posturing for IMF to please them at the expense of wananchi?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say something after him.
Okay.
What has happened is, I think when President Kibaki came in, he turned east, means he started working with China. And that's when we started getting an increase in aid from China substantially, and we found a lot of Chinese companies coming into the country for contracts to build the roads and all the infrastructure and so forth. So since then, I think President Uhuru Kenyatta also continued with the same policy of working more closely. And many African countries, by the way, and because China suddenly just came up on the stage in Africa, and once they set up that Africa-China summit and funding, billions of dollars every year to all the countries in the region because of that, because of their own plan. But I think a lot of countries, went for China in Africa because, one, they were given loans and, without a lot of conditions. The problem we had with the previous Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and Western countries generally, is that when you get an aid, it is always subject to certain conditionalities. And this is the problem Moi had all those years that he was the president. So a lot of countries signed on. Every country in Africa and Asia, I think people went into China. But when President Ruto came in, and that's why, by the way, China had the largest loans to Kenya in terms of our indebtedness. It is to China the largest, because it was built up over the period of Kibaki and Uhuru. When President Ruto came, he was more close, or he's more close to the West, America and the UK and just Europe, the Western countries. And once then he was in good books with the West, then they automatically you go into good books of IMF and World Bank, because those are institutions that are used by the West. And as expected, then once you sign on to IMF and World Bank, then the conditionalities are back. And the IMF is known. If you want loans, you will get it, but you must raise taxes, because it's always about are you able to pay their taxes? Are you able to pay our loans? So that is the main thing. So they don't look at your cost of living, or the IMF is not interested in your well-being. They are not the ones who deal with your infrastructure. They are looking at, can you tax and can you pay the loan? They support budget. That is basically why their loans are all about the fiscal, the fiscal status of the country in terms of how much revenue you can generate and all that. So I think it took a whole year before President Ruto could even utter the word China. Forget about visiting China. But the other day he was there in China, and but clearly from what we have seen in the media, that warm reception that we used to see with Kibaki and Uhuru, that warm relationship was not there.
Wasn't really extended there.
It wasn't in the center of things in China the way he is when he's, the way very favorably the America and France and all these Western countries have talked about him. Suddenly that is not the case. So I think clearly he by now appreciates that. That is why many African countries are looking to the East, many Asian countries, because of the fact that there's a price to be paid if you want to borrow. After all, you'll still pay the loan. But in the case of Western countries, there's a price to be paid if you borrow again, in terms of conditionalities and so forth. So I think there's need to balance today in the world. You cannot just rely on certain countries for your economic ties, whether it's trade or investment or loans. I think you just need to balance, and I think this country, more than any other country, needs to do that. I know the reason why we went for this Bretton Woods institutions, because the cost of finance there is cheaper than in China. But I think there's need to balance. Kenya's trading has largely been with America and EU than China, where our exports are mainly to those regions more than China. So China is basically, I'm sure, taking a backseat in our relationship. But I think it's important to balance, in my view.
Right. You want to say something?
Yes, I was just going to say, in respect of whether or not IMF dictates, I wouldn't say they do, but we know the kind of purpose that they serve by virtue of how they were set up. When you're completely out of balance of everything, your trade balances are not good, you're in great debt and so on, all those kinds of things. Your budget is not meeting your requirements and you want to get a lift, you go to IMF and they do that. You know in advance what they're going to ask for. In fact, as you put in your proposals and so on, you suggest as a country where it is that you're going to do cost sharing, which is another way we put it, where you're going to completely liberalize or privatize or whatever the case might be. Governments make those proposals in anticipation of receiving the aid. And then what they do, they codify it into an agreement. And most governments are very clever. After they have codified, they say, IMF asked us to do this. You should ask them, what is it you told IMF in the first instance? It is possible for countries to work themselves out of IMF aid. It's possible. It is more difficult for them to work out of multilateral institutions like the World Bank or the African Development Bank, because those can provide long-term capital that's consistent with borrowing, but sustainable borrowing. It is possible depending on how you use it. IDA in the World Bank, I don't think we qualify for it anymore, being a middle-income country, would give a 10-year grace period and 30 years above that for repayment, a total of 40 years or so. And if you consider it at rates that are below 2%, as it were in those old days, maybe now they are barely there again, which is almost interest-free, you'd say, over a 40-year period. And you have enough time to invest in education, to invest in social services, because their returns do not show up in cash that quickly year after year. But countries need to do certain things faster than they want. You want to build your expressway, even though your highway to Malaba is not yet built up to speed, or to Mombasa, but you want to get an expressway in Nairobi, so you want to shortcut that, you borrow and you use the money, and you strain your balance of payments, and you ask IMF for a little more money. So there is a sort of addictive process there, probably that countries have to win themselves. Now, when countries tax more like ours has taxed, sometimes they say, let us tax so that we are independent. We are less dependent on our tax. But you see, if you do that and your expenditure grows even faster than this influence you have, you get even deeper into it and you need to borrow more. I think this time we reevaluated our national value system that we want to develop.
Indeed.
And say, what is it we can do, we must do.
Right. Shem, briefly,
from
a prepare our headline
biblical perspective, God asked Moses, what do you have in your hand? We must ask ourselves as a country, and maybe let's think of ourselves as a corporation. what are our strategic advantages? Focusing on resources that we have, we are even comparing ourselves to the region. Political stability, we have it. How do we take advantage of that? I am perturbed about, even though the FDI is only $800 million, we're paying so much attention, and we should. How about the 4.2 billion that diasporas bring in, and we know a quarter of it? So say 1 billion goes into investment as of now, and we're looking into how do we double that within the next 5 years. And yet we're not having a major conversation with them. There are those who will, come rain, come shine, they'll bring their money into our economy. But Debal, in addition, I think improving the environment so that investment can come in and making it easy, particularly for producers of products and services, suppliers of services, particularly for export, can do that and do it even better. And being more creative. You know, areas like we are very good in technology. To what extent are we using that to create jobs and put money into the pockets of our people? Not only money from the local market, and I support the idea of making it attractive for local investors, domestic investors to invest more. But our focus, in my view, primarily should be production for export, for local consumption and export. And also, the cost of electricity is a major disincentive, which we need to address. But I see it as an opportunity rather than seeing it as a problem, so that we make electricity affordable to attract more inflows. Finally, I was talking to some Belgian investors who are presently visiting Kigali, and they're thinking of starting a diaspora investment fund. And they're saying, do we go to Kigali as a financial center? I was trying to say, okay, Kigali is my second home, but Nairobi is also my first home. They are weighing the options. The point is that there is such much opportunity, even amidst the gloom that we have. But finally, they say when you're in a hole, you stop digging further. And this is why we must do a balancing act. I must admit, I'm not an expert in China, but knowing that most of the debts we have are with them, we have to have a conversation with both sides of the world, but being alive to the fact of our long-term friends for strategic reasons, that we must continue looking the way we have. Kwame Nkrumah did say, when asked, are you going west or east? He said, we'll go neither, we'll go forward.
Right. All right. Milokero, I just wanted, as we're winding up, we have this particular editorial cartoon there. There's a dossier loading, and this is on the fuel scandal. We eagerly wait to hear from Azimio leader Raila Odinga on this particular latest development on the government to government. He says he has some information on it. And I wanted just to pick your thoughts on what has been headlining since Monday and Tuesday. It has been about Anne Njoroge and forgery claim in the 17 billion shilling fuel saga. Just briefly, as we're winding up, what is happening inside there? Maybe you're privy to some information I don't have.
No,
he always has.
He always has.
I'm not privy to any information, but I was in the industry. It surprises me when someone says she's, brought 100,000 tons of diesel to Mombasa. She's just like that. It doesn't sound. I really think this story by the lady is completely unacceptable, because you can't. Because when you bring fuel, you need to have a storage and transport agreement with KPC, with the Kenya Pipeline Company, because you must discharge it into the KPC tanks at Kipebu. Without that arrangement, without a license from EPRA also for you to import or trade in petroleum products, is impossible. So I think when I listened to her, she applied, and I was waiting for the application, and but I am not surprised if some people are not behind this thing. I mean, there is no way a lady would just wake up and create a story as big as this, and go into court, and I read one of the matters that there are people who are. I think somebody was trying a long shot, and this happened, by the way, just before the election, when it's the former guys who were in power. He wasn't at the time. They should not worry.
He's still not.
Yeah. Well, they brought him just before the election. They could bring in, because the government overrides all the rules. You bring in a tanker, and get KPC to discharge it and get people to buy. I mean, you can override the rules, the procedures and the controls. But I think this story, clearly, I'm not convinced that this lady
Right.
story there, unless.
Thank you.
But maybe there's more than Mr.
Yeah, my music is up right now. Just getting closing remarks, maybe briefly, 10 seconds from you, Munyasi Sakwa, 10 seconds.
Yeah, I would really like this decision on perception of high taxes to be brought under control. I think government must come out and talk about mitigating measures on the impact of these higher taxes. They must begin to address that. Just like I think the central bank
Thank you.
must address the issue of what their policy is on the management of the shilling.
Thank you.
Very important.
Right.
But for me, creating an enabling environment for enterprise, for business is key. Let's make it paying to do clean business. Good governance is key. Cost cutting is key, and government should lead the way in that regard. Because when we send a wrong signal, like this case of 13 billion shillings of fuel, we send a wrong signal to those who are already investing in this country. We scare away those who would come into the country.
Thank you. Right, Shema Sholdo, I really appreciate you coming through, Bunyasi Sakwa as well, and Bill Okero for that insightful conversation we've had on the current state of economy in the country. Of course, all the stories that we have with the dossier loading on a scandal and of Anjoroge is another Kafura story, if you may remember the NIS story. And the Kafura was actually the poster child of it, but there were very powerful people behind NIS. And where is the NIS case right now? It has actually crumbled to, of course, to dust right now, because no one has been arraigned as we speak, or in the slumbers as we speak. We had also one of the PS that recently she's out of the slumbers as well.